Hello, everyone. I'm Ruth, and I'm going to start by singing a song called Hannah Healy, The Pride of Hoth, which I thought might be apt for today because we're talking about a book that is set in Fingal, where I'm also from. I'm from Sutton. Yeah, just down the road. And Sutton is next to Hoth. And I just thought it might be interesting because this song is from the mid 18. Oh, sorry, shit. Okay, this song is from the mid 1800s. Better, yeah. So it's about a bunch of lads who fancy a girl and they're too scared to say anything to her. And it just, I think, goes to show that maybe nothing has changed in those times. So, and I don't normally sing it, so I'm gonna do my best. You matchless nine to my aid incline, assist my genius while I declare my lovesick pain for a beauteous dame whose killing charms did me ensnare. Sly little Cupid has knocked me stupid, in grief I mourn upon my oath. My frame's declining, I'm sorry pining for Hannah Healy, the pride of Hoth. She's tall and slender, both young and tender. She's modest, mild, and she's all sublime. For education in Erin's nation, there's none to equal this nymph divine. I wish to gain her, but can't obtain her. I'd fondly court her, but yet I'm loath, lest I should tease her or once displease her. Sweet Hannah Healy, the pride of Hoth. At 17, this maid serene, my heart attracted, I must allow. I thought her surely a goddess purely, or some bright angel in truth I vow. Since that I languish, my mind's in anguish, a deep decline it has curbed my growth. None can relieve me, you can believe me, but Hannah Healy, the pride of Hoth. In all Olympus, I'm sure no nymph is to equal her that I do admire. Her lovely feature surpasses nature. Alas, she sets my poor heart on fire. She exceeds Flora or bright Aurora, or beauteous Venus from the briny froth. I'm captivated, I do repeat it, by Hannah Healy, the pride of Hoth. Each lovely morning young men keep swarming to view this charmer taking the air. She's so enchanting, they all are panting to gain her favour, I do declare. But still they're fearful and no way cheerful. The greatest hero you'd find him loath, nor daring to read her or supplicate her. So bright an angel is the pride of Hoth. I'll drop my writing and my inditing. I see it's useless for me to fret. A pound of trouble or sorrow double will ne'er atone for an ounce of debt. I'll resign courting
Hi everyone and welcome to Sligo Library. My name is Michelle Brennan and I just want to welcome you to our October edition of The Word featuring author Kevin Curran, who will be in conversation with Sean Farrell of the Lilliput Press. Kevin will be chatting with Sean Farrell. Kevin is a former secondary school teacher and he's written a number of novels, and he will be talking about his new acclaimed novel, Youth. We will also have music, as you've just heard, with Ruth Clinton, who's just performed an amazing song there. And she'll be performing 2 more pieces. We have our open mic, which Shay Fahy will be facilitating. And we will have our audience Q&A, which you're all welcome to take part in. I am now going to officially hand you over to Sean Farrell, and welcome and enjoy. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. I'm going to borrow from the Sunday Business Post for a one-line introduction. Kevin Curran has some big things to say about Ireland, past and present. I think that's a good thing for a man who is, as well as being a writer, a father of 2 young children and a secondary school teacher. Happily for us, he also reaches a national audience. He's written numerous short stories for major anthologies and literary journals, and has published 3 novels: Beatsploitation 2013, Citizens in 2016, and Youth earlier this year. He's received wide acclaim for his depiction of Ireland's new multicultural landscape, and among the many endorsements from his contemporaries for Youth, I think Ronan Hessian puts it best. He says, "Vibrant and immersive, it captures brilliantly the fragile confidence that lies at the heart of youth culture." Much has been said about Kevin's ear for language, and RODDY DOYLE concentrated on this when he reviewed the book for the Irish Times. He writes that Irish English has always been wild. Kevin Curran's Youth seems to be telling us that we're only starting. I hope we'll come to that aspect of things, but I'd like to start at the beginning and ask Kevin 2 questions. One, why did you start writing? And what was the first thing you had published?
Why did I start writing? What a question. There's no answer to that. I always wrote, like, as far as back as I can remember, I always wrote. First thing I had published was a story called Wizards in the local Fingal Independent. You probably know it, yeah. I think J.K. Rowling ripped it off maybe 10 years later. And a photographer came to the house and took a picture of me at the door in my front room, and I was all done up, and they published that story in the paper, and that was the start of my publishing life. But as far as why did I write, I always wrote about Fingal, I always wrote about Balbriggan. When I was about 20, I wrote about a 30,000 word novella called Green, and I think then another book was called Millions, came out a few years later. Again, this is about kids when around about the year 2000. They had punts, and it was when the punts were changing into euro, and they found a bag of this. They had to spend this in time, and that was then done by an English writer in a book called Millions. So I was onto something there, and then all through my 20s, I wrote. It's only afterwards that you realise when you kind of look back. I'd say I wrote about 100,000 words of short stories in my 20s. Did nothing with them, just wrote them.
Okay. Yeah. And what age were you when the first thing got done?
The Beatsploitation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before Beatsploitation, the first thing people said to me when they read Beatsploitation was, "Oh my God, your first sentence is amazing. You know, from the first chapter, it sounds so great." But like, I had obviously all of my 20s writing short stories, and I also had a book called Dirge, and I wrote when I was about 27, another 70,000 word book that was useless, but I had to write it, you know, that kind of way, and it took me those 80,000 words, I'd say, to get into the voice of Beatsploitation. So Beatsploitation was late 20s when I wrote that, over the course of 2 or 3 years, I'd say. I did the majority of it in a workshop with the Sting and Fly over this. I was only thinking about it today when I was coming here, thinking about it. I literally wrote, I'd say, 3/4 of that book over 6 months in the Sting and Fly workshop, which was amazing, but it was also problematic as a writer, because when you look back at it, you think it reads like a workshopped book, if that makes sense to any writers. Not sure if you have time to go into it, but, you know.
Yeah. No, do. That's what because that's what I'd like to talk about tonight, is kind of getting behind the scenes of a finished book.
So Beatsploitation was like, it was 120,000 words, and I would have, as I said, done the guts of it in the space of a year, and for 6 months I would have written it with the Sting and Fly workshop, and the workshop was amazing and the readers were amazing, but the problem is you take everything they say on board and you forget about where you wanted the story to go. Now, I was obviously younger as well, so as a young writer, you're not kind of sure about what you want to be as a writer as well. And so I remember one writer in particular who I'm still good friends with, and he's published a lot of books and he's great, but he used to kept on asking me, what's at stake here? What's at stake? And so I was writing a lot of flashbacks to bring us into the present. And I recently redid the book, Beatsploitation. I looked over it again because it was, just to see how it was. And I was working on it for different reasons. And I took out everything that was there. I could take out another 30,000 words of the book. So it was 120,000 words and it was brought down to 90. And then when I looked at it 10 years later, I took out another 30,000, brought it down to 60. And it was all just forward motion instead of all the flashbacks and what's at stake, and giving stories about the character's girlfriend, giving stories about the character's old life. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a book that I needed to write at the time, but when you get older, you realise these things you get into your own kind of way of writing and your own style of writing, and you realise what you like more in books as opposed to what the workshop likes. But that's hard to work through when you're on a debut, I suppose. And
then for the second one, for Citizens, was that a similar process? Or?
I think Zadie Smith is obviously has a new book out. She says, I listen to a lot of her podcasts, and she says a story should have urgency. And I get what she says 100%. Like, the story that you want to tell should feel urgent, and you have a real urgency to tell it. I had a real urgency to tell Beatsploitation because of the story. I had a real urgency to tell Youth because of the story.
Sorry, what can you tell us what the story was behind Beatsploitation?
Beatsploitation was a number of things. More than anything, a student of mine was to be deported in summer, and he was to be deported in, I think it was June. And subsequently I learned that they kind of deport students in the summer, so that school can't kind of make big noise about it. So I just knew the student for 5 years, so I went to a meeting in Balbriggan. I was the only adult to turn up, and there was just all other kids there. And it became very political very soon. I didn't want to get into politics. I was just there for the student. I thought he deserved a chance to sit his leaving cert. And just some things that other kind of kids said to me kind of made me kind of realise, wow. I got in touch with another school to kind of look for help about how we could kind of get a case to, look after the student who's BOLA. Like, I've spoken about it in the past before. And the other school didn't come back because they had helped a case previously, but they did not want to become known as the school that you go to when other students have been deported. And that kind of left a really bitter taste in my mouth. So then the story Beatsploitation came out of that. The only problem being when you write your debut in first person and set it in your hometown, and you intentionally make the main character not a nice person and kind of racist in a way, because I wanted to say a few things about where I thought Ireland was in 2011, 2012. It doesn't make it the most. The book did really well, but the main character himself was not someone people liked, which maybe I should have done better or wrote in a more better way. But the main character for me in the book was Kembo, a character called Kembo, who was to be deported in the book, and that was my achievement for that book. I was pleased with that. But that was an urgent book. But then to get back to Citizens, Citizens was urgent for the wrong reasons. It was a book to do with the 1916 rising and emigration in Ireland. A lot of my friends had left the country, but I wanted to write it urgently because of the centenary, which is the wrong reason to want to write a story quickly, And it was done, I think I wrote it over 3 years, and it wasn't very well edited. Could have been edited a lot better. Maybe should have stayed on the shelf, or stayed in a drawer. You have the book and you want to get every book out that you write, but maybe looking back, it shouldn't have been published. Don't get me wrong now, I've read bits here and there, and I'm blown away by, I don't know how I got myself into because I wrote it from 2 points of view, from 1916 and 2016, 2015. And the 1916 voice is I'm impressed by myself, wow, I did a lot of research and I got the voice, but maybe, it could have done another year or two of work and not to be rushed out for the centenary.
So what's wrong with it?
It's not true. I know it's the lamest thing to say, but like Beatsploitation has truth running through it. There's a real sense of Ireland at the time. I forced it for citizens, and I did, and it's not a real sense of truth in it. And then youth is the truest thing I've ever written. You know, the most intense kind of real piece of work that's got closest to what I want to say, I suppose. But Citizens wasn't that, unfortunately.
Oh, did you have an editor for?
I did, yeah, I did, but I get, you know, in publishing, editors are under pressure for different things, and just the time given to it could have been, not on the editor's side, on my side, could have been, I think just worked harder on it, you know. Yeah, I think you get lazy as well, not necessarily lazy, but like when I published Beatsploitation, I knew then Citizens was going to be published because of the publisher. It kind of basically said that. So I wasn't driving myself as hard as I could have and working as hard as I could have, whereas Youth wasn't getting published until I met this man here. So like I spent 5 years working on this, 4 years before Lilliput, like making sure it was as good as it could be so it might be published. Whereas I think subconsciously I got lazy with Citizens, yeah.
And how did Youth, because Youth was a short story to begin with, was it? Or how did it?
The theme of tonight might be being lazy. I'm a teacher as well, so you know, I remember hearing someone like Rob Doyle, who's a writer who I admire, and he talked about he writes, it's his full time, it's what he does, and I remember him saying that, you know, time for him is reading. You know, that's his job, to read, and so I don't 9 to 5. I'm not reading. I'm in class. And what I am reading is kind of textbooks or school books that you can kind of get on the course, which I make sure there are ones that I like. But so I thought I'd kind of do something that no one did before, is write short stories, mangle them all together and make it a book called Youth. And then it took me 5 years to realise that isn't how it works. But they ultimately were short stories, you know. Like there's a character in this book called Tanya that was... she was in a short story in 2015 called Saving Tanya. She only arrived in the last 3 pages of the book, but that's her story there. There's a character called Princess who was in a short story in 2016 for a literary magazine, The Penny Dreadful, in Cork. And that was accepted for publication, and her opening 10 pages of this as the 2016 short story. The Penny Dreadful, subsequently it closed or it shut down before I published it, but they had accepted it for publication. Angels, first part here was with a number of places for short stories. So it was a lot of short stories. But in saying that, like there's 4 characters here, all in I would have written 11 characters, and then after much cajoling and editorial feedback from different places, I got rid of 11 and I made it 4, which I think makes it much more readable.
And I suppose the classic question is, what do you wish you'd known when you were starting out in terms of writing that you've kind of learnt as you've gone? The book I had in my late 20s called Dirge, I gave it to friends to read. It was like a big thick 300-page thing. And one of my friends who's quite, she's into poetry and that, she says, your book's brilliant. It really gets going after page 60. I was like, thanks so much. And I just, went on. And I was like, but back then I didn't realise you should have just cut the first 60 pages, and that's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 is if it kind of doesn't feel as if it's there, it's not there. The work isn't there. Even though I've been sending out youth to so many different people, and I was getting feedback from so many good agents and publishers saying this is really good, but it's not there. And I was thinking, they're wrong, it is there. But it wasn't there. It wasn't there. Even when Sean got it last year, the year before, I thought it was there, and it wasn't there, but it took a good editor to kind of say it's not there, and here's the reasons why. Now you can accept those reasons, or you can have an ego and say, no, I believe it's there. But I think a lot of writing, good writing, is collaboration. Just look at films, directors, So if you're willing to listen to other people's opinion, and if you trust their opinion, Sean would have edited 30 pages of Youth,
off the back of me handing it in. Now there was no promise to publish, but he obviously enjoyed what you read. But he just sent me back 30 pages, and when I saw those 30 pages came back, I was like, oh man. Like I have to get the next, 170, 220 pages edited by this man, because just what he was saying made sense and I could see where it was going. And just the questions that were being asked of the text were questions that I hadn't thought of and I hadn't pushed myself on.
I suppose it's difficult to know when to listen and when to ignore feedback.
Yeah, in saying that, you have to ignore certain things. You have to kind of have a belief in your own work and your own vision, because obviously no matter how much you trust the editor or how much you know the editor is looking for things in a text, you have to kind of believe in what you're looking for. I remember you want to get rid of Dean, which is one of the 4 characters. Sean just wanted to cut him out completely. And I remember saying at the time, I'll work harder on him, because I needed to keep him. He needed to be kept. But he was right at the time. The character of Dean is obviously 25% of the book, because he was a white Balbriggan 17-year-old, and I was once a white Balbriggan 17-year-old. He tuned in on something that I hadn't done properly, which was write him with as much energy and as much detail as I had the other characters. And so I kind of laid back and again got lazy and kind of thought, well, the other characters like Angel, Princess and Tanya, who's a 15-year-old girl, I really got to be intense here and I got to make sure I'm on point for everything. So I got to research everything and really, get in on it. Whereas the editor knew that Dean wasn't that. I thought he was the easiest one to write, and by thinking he was the easiest one to write, I'd taken my foot off the pedal. So I promised then that they'd let me work on him and get the details out of him and kind of get a sense of the character and the story. And it worked. I'm really happy with him in the end, because it made me kind of push it a lot further than Dean had been pushed.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting what you were saying about writing as collaboration, because I know you work with your students.
All fiction is putting yourself out there to be kind of ridiculed. I could have easily written like a 30-year-old dude from Balbriggan, and you're not going to be ridiculed in the sense that like you don't know what you're talking about or you're wrong. So when you decide to write teenagers, we've all been teenagers, so we all know what it's like. But when you decide to write teenagers who are, in this case, African-Irish for 2 of them, and then one is a girl who's 15 who's online a lot and has a lot of online content being posted, you have to, you could be ridiculed, like you genuinely could be ridiculed. So for me, I was lucky enough before Lilliput came knocking, or before I went knocking to them, I'd asked 2 students just to read the Princess chapter, which luckily enough it's a short. See, I wouldn't ask a student to read the whole thing because that's mean, and they probably wouldn't read it anyway. So I asked a girl to read the Princess chapters, which would be, let's say about 20,000 words maybe. And so she read Princess for me in May of 21, maybe 22, I can't remember. And then another student, Yinka, read the Angel chapters. And by and large, I got them right, thank God. There was 1 or 2, we had some laughs. Like I called the character, a princess, called someone in the pharmacy a MILF, which was just, and the kids were like, come on, like a 17-year-old would never call a lady walking in here a MILF. And I was like, all right, yeah. So there was a few real slippages like that, but it wasn't major. I was kind of on point for most of the stuff. But that's the thing in my case, when you're, especially when you're writing teenagers, like I've been teaching for 14 years, you see this and you hear the same things over and over again, like when the kids come through and they're 17-year-olds doing their leaving cert, like I've seen that 14 times. So the same concerns come up for every year, and the same kind of emotional issues and the same issues of belonging come up. But then when I got the go-ahead from Lilliput, I was lucky enough in that I got then 3 African-Irish girls to read the Princess chapters again, just to really cement it in place. Because again, I knew it was going to be published. I was like, I have to be right on this. And they were good enough to read Princess chapters for me over the space of about 6 weeks. they would have read about half an hour a week for about 6 weeks. And again, there was no major issues, which I was delighted to see. There was no issues. In fact, they were kind of highlighting things, and anytime I'd walk into the room after they were reading, they were looking at me like I was like, how do you know this was what they were kind of saying? I say, well, I see it every day, you know, I hear you, you know, even though I'm up at the top of a room, I can hear you talking, you know. I'm an English teacher and we talk about a lot of stuff in class. And then just and it was just then, again, back to the details and back to making the character just that bit, sing that bit more. And then even the small thing, the thing I've told everyone in interviews is when they'd finished it all, I sat with them and I said, like, is there anything at all from your perspective that I'm missing out from a 17-year-old African-Irish girl that you think is glaringly obviously not in this book? And they just looked at each other and laughed and said, she needs to do more chores. I remember then I sent Sean an email and said, we got to put some more chores in here. But other than that, that was it. But even up until, like, Sean was, like, I'm a collaboration. Like, I was lucky, and I'm not deluded to know that what I have in front of me in my school is an incredible opportunity to write about kind of an Ireland that hasn't been written about. Even things like Sean would say to me, I think the word was rocked, like there was a student being punched too often in the book. The word rocked was used too often. And he said to me, you got to get a new word for rocked. It's just a slang word for punched. So the next day I just went into school and just grabbed 2 lads and said, lads, give me another word for rocked. They came back with banged and whooshed. So I was like, grand, there we go. So in that sense, you know, and I'm not backwards in telling this because, you know, it's foolish to think like all novels, all writers are voyeurs. They are, like, you know, we get what we write about from observing. So when you write a book about 4 teenagers in this kind of way, you can't pretend that you weren't observing or you weren't listening and you weren't. I think talking is the other thing as well. You know, you couldn't write this without talking and hearing stories over the last 14 or 12 years. So that's where it would have come from, other people's stories. But that's what all writing is, I suppose, unless we're doing auto-fiction, which you're not going to get from me.
And we were talking before about how the difference now that your students realise they're being watched. How does that affect things?
So, like, even, you know, I'm just interested. I think I'm interested just to keep it interesting for myself in teaching. You know, I love teaching and I love the classroom. I have friends who's a principal, and I have a friend who's a vice principal, and other people saying, do you not want to be a principal? I'm like, no, I love the classroom. I genuinely love the classroom, especially in an English classroom. You know, what am I reading this year? I'm reading Colin Barrett's Young Skins. We're watching Shawshank. Last year we read Room. I'm doing Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun. I'm doing more Shakespeare again. You know, what's not to love about that? If you like literature, it's amazing. Then I'll always do Heaney's poetry. Why not? Every time you read it, something different. But the problem being, to keep me interested as well, I listen to the kids and what they're saying. And because of youth, like loads of people have read it in Balbriggan. It's like I'm getting stopped in the toilets in my dad's pub by people like my dad's age. Oh, you wrote that book, I read it, I loved it. It's like, oh, right, so this is where we are now in Balbriggan. I never thought 70-year-old men would be reading it, which freaks me out. But kids now are saying in school, I'm saying, what's that you said? And kids literally looking at me going, you just want to know what I'm saying because you want to put it in your next book. Like, yeah. A teacher friend of mine who's an engineering teacher says, like, when the kids are talking, we tell them to shut up, whereas you just say, keep going. So you can get more information. But yeah, so like that's what you get when number one, a book is set in your hometown, I suppose, like that. But also there's a bit of a buzz around it in Balbriggan because of the nature of the book. But like when you have old men coming up to you in the toilets, and even my own dad was listening to it on the audiobook, which was it was a bit strange. I had to sign him into Audible for that, and I was like, do you really want to listen to this? And he's like, yeah. So yeah.
I just wanted to go back to that idea about the language as well. Another thing you were telling me is how out of date already the language is in the book. This would have been what, Balbriggan teenagers last year? No,
that's the mad thing about it. So like obviously the book was being written for 6 years, 7 years, you know. As I said, Saving Tanya was 2015, so that's 8 years now. It's mad. But the angel character, who's the character who does the uniquely Balbriggan vernacular, which is Balbriggan, which in itself is already a mix of Drogheda and Dublin and country, kind of flat Dublin. And then you have London slang, and then you have African, a mix of African slang, and not just Nigerian, because the kids mix so much. And just to give a bit of context, I forget, when sometimes I'm talking to people, like the school I teach in and the classes I teach would have 50%, you know, my 2 Leaving Cert classes, 5th year and 6th year, last year and this year would have 50% African-Irish kids. So, you know, it's an incredible mix in front of me, and so you hear it. But the language is just, I cut it off at around 2022, I think. And when I'm saying that, like, I genuinely did, like, to build up the language for Angel, because I was seeing this in front of me and hearing this in front of me, and that's why, like, no one was hearing this, you know, this language, this mix of language. And as a writer, I've always said, like, in 20 years' time, people would say, oh, you call yourself a writer, but you didn't think about writing about Balbriggan in the year 2020, because my line is that Balbriggan is Ireland's future now, because it's the youngest town in Ireland, and I believe, because Black and Irish, the people who released a new book, did a talk to me last week, and they've been talking about it. It's the second youngest town in Europe, which blew my mind. But it's also, according to the census, it's Ireland's most diverse town. So I'm in the ticketings there, you know. Now I'm obviously from the town, so I've seen the change. But as far as the language goes, it's just an incredible mix. But yeah, so I would have got the kids, we would have made up a dictionary in class. And the dictionary, I remember at the start, is literally a 3 A4 page dictionary for me. And that's what I kind of worked off. And then, because the kids make a lot of drill music, or they did make a lot of drill music, which is kind of a really, no easy way of saying it, misogynistic, violent version of hip-hop. That's come first from Chicago, then London. That's where they got a lot of London slang from. So they were making videos that were getting, you know, in some cases 1 million views on YouTube of them doing their rap in the estate in Balbriggan. And then they were making videos going around Balbriggan, just recording themselves walking around Balbriggan. And they were talking, as they do, as they go around my man dad's estate. Mm-hmm. You know, the football pitches I'd play on, and you're just listening to what they're saying. So I took notes of that. And but that brought me up to around about 2022, and then you had to cut it off as far as the language goes, because you just can't keep up. Like, you know, the language, like the easiest version to say is like, I remember one of the notes was she's a pang ting, which means she's good looking. But that's now changed in the last year to she's leng. So instead of P-E-N-G, it's L-E-N-G, you know. And even when I'm saying it, I sound ridiculous. That's why I'm glad we got an actor to do this for the audiobook. But you know, you can't keep up with that, and so you get stuck between this place and another place. But in around about May this year, Gabriel Adewusi, the guy who did Angel in the audiobook, who's an amazing actor, he did a kind of a quick recording of a bit of Angel. And as soon as I heard it, it blew my mind. But I played it in school to a group of my seniors. I told Gabriel this. I said, I didn't tell them anything. I had a free class. I stuck it on, because it was on obviously an MP3 or something. And it was just like literally 2 or 3 minutes worth of Angel in the start of the book. And the Leaving Cert straight away said, oh, let's say that's Jimmy's older brother. Where did you get a recording of Jimmy's older brother? And he meant someone who was 20, 21. They could spot the language change in the speak, because 3 minutes that they knew it was from 3 years ago, in 3 minutes worth of audio. But in saying that, Gabriel, the actor who did Angel as well, he when we were in the studio, I gave him YouTube clips of the lads from Balbriggan, and he would literally listen to them, and he'd be in the mic repeating what they were saying to get the sense of the language. Mm-hmm. I wasn't sure how the language would travel then. A lot of people have said it takes them a while to get into it, but you get into it, you know, it's the same as anything. You know, once a few pages in, you'll get into it. But it's travelled, you know, the language has... You know, people are buying it for what it is. I thought people would think I'm ridiculous and say this is nonsense. People don't talk like that in Balbriggan. You know, if you're reading it in Cork, you'd be kind of going, what is this? Or reading it in Donegal. But people have bought it and are buying into it. And the thing for me that really is gratifying is there's a few of the kids at the launch in Dublin, and one guy in Yola who's like a lovely student of mine from years ago, he comes up and he's like, I never knew you could, were you listening to us? I never knew you could write this, because we had an actor, Gabriel, was reading this in the launch, so it made it hyper real, you know. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to surprise people like that, which means you're I was on the money, I suppose.
Yeah, no, it's amazing the amount of work that has to go into taking a short snapshot in time.
Yeah, like Angel, like the character of Angel would only be maybe 15,000 words, but again, I gave him in as a short story to a number of places, and one big literary magazine held on to it for a year. They said no for summer, but they wanted to do it in Christmas, and then ultimately didn't do it. So I worked on him for a long time, but ultimately it just worked off about 5, maybe 6 pages of just a stream of words on an A4 page, to have the language, but then more so it was about the rhythm of the language, not just the words, it's how you use them and how you, especially for a teenager, how you phrase. And you couldn't just work off the page, you had to hear it in front of you. So I had to listen constantly to how they were saying it, and you know yourself, the rhythm and the way they say it. I'd originally written the character of Angel. I'm glad it wasn't taken up in the end, but he'd originally been written like a rhyming couplets, like kind of like Shakespearean, is in that.
I'm glad I didn't see it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, so the whole thing was not rhyming couplets, but he rhymed a lot in the piece. So I took that out.
Should we have a reading?
If you want to, I'll just read the opening. What do you want? How long do I have? I'll just do 2 minutes. I'll do the opening. But the thing about this book is, I knew when I was writing it that I'd never be able to read certain characters because I just sound ridiculous reading them. So I don't have much on offer to read in this. It's just the opening or the closing, and I'm not going to read the closing because I would spoil it for you. I'll just give you the opening. I'll give you the opening 3 pages for Angel, if that's all right. Before I do, I'll say Claire Keegan again. Claire Keegan says all good writing is good manners. I think she got that from Flannery O'Connor. I took that a step too far, and from my opening, it just says Angel 18. I just wanted to let you know straight away that it's Angel, and he's 18 years old. Okay. He speaks in your voice, Dublin, and there's something hopeful in the new edges of his words and phrases that has come through revolutions, generations, and across continents to be witnessed here on these streets now. Angel is shaping down Mainstreet of a Friday afternoon in late March. Traffic is heavy, the footpaths are busy, and he is one of 3 friends bustling through. A blur of hands and fingers at angles, making shadow puppets to the uninformed. A simple K for those in the know. They're all theatrical eyes, aghast mouths. That's a bar, eyes echo loud. That's a bar, no, this a bar. You Congo boys eat rocks. That's a lie, bro, that's a lie. All you Ghana boys eat eggs. Don't say nothing about us Nigerians. Swear down, boys, you'll be getting hands. All 3 of them are on display, teenagers, roadmen, giving verbals while widening the aperture of this washed-out world. The rain has stopped and the pavement is bright and slick, and although it's Friday and sunny, they know this spring buzz won't last for long. Hunger drives them. Luckily, this 400-metre slope of Mainstreet, Balbriggan, from SuperValu to the square, is the meal deal capital of County Dublin. There's Libro's Italian pizzas warming in the oven and shielded by dirty netting in the window. Borza with the blue neon sign saying value, value, value. Macari's high top chrome counter guarding the fryer. SuperValu deli a trek past the fruit and veg under the always suspicious eyes of the security guard. Polski delicacy hiding its bland meats and sausage behind frosted glass lettering. Belly Burger in its prime location across from the monument overlooking the Bracken. FLC, Noodle Box, Apache, Domino's, Mahi Mahal, Hand In Palace, Coffee Pot, Supermax, Papa John's, Mr. Wu, the soup kitchen beside the Dole office, and Spar. As tall as the others, Angel is the thinnest of the 3. His wide, cat-like eyes are forever scanning for trouble. If he sees it early, he can sidestep it like a messy feint, because that's what he does as he walks. He feints and shuffles. His nervous energy is a necessity. His black Nike Air Force runners are worn to a woolly grey where the imitation leather meets the sole. It's a low-key embarrassment, only evading detection by scaring his feet into constant action. His school trousers are short, tight above the ankle, unable to keep up with the sprint through adolescence. His jacket, the black puffer North Face uniform of all 3, is that bit older and looser on him. On they go, Palumi spitting out some new bars he's working on. I love my block, that's all I got, I love my block. Isaac and Angel support him with loud shouts of encouragement, but being loud doesn't come natural to Angel. It might seem to fit well, but it weighs heavily like a wet t-shirt. Be the collective experience when alone. That's the ambition, that's the shame. The lie under this fluid, confident strut. The aggressive disregard for onlookers is a rebuke to himself. The self-aware, self-conscious bitch boy who worries his way through the town when he's on his ones. Why does he always need his boys? Why is he always on sketch, ready to dash, so lacking? For now, Angel commands the street with his friends and, without pausing for permission, they stop traffic and cross, a mixtape of car horns soundtracking their parade. They own the path and refuse to make way for some guy in shorts coming through the sparse sliding doors with a six-pack of beer. Palumi blocks him, knocks into him. This waste man is hench and still he staggers and his bottles clink. One cracks and suddenly there's a mess of suds. Palumi kisses his teeth and sneers. What you gonna do? The lad curses at them, but on they go, defiant, without remorse or consequence, striding into encounters Angel would rather dodge. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions out there? Do we have a mic for...
Hey.
There we go. Thank you. Hello. I have loads of questions, but obviously I can't ask them all. As part of my one of my modules for my degree, where I'm reading this book with another fella, so I've already started that, and I'm super interested. But one of the questions I had is less about the book and more about. So I started writing because of my junior cert English teacher. And I kept writing because of my Leaving Cert English teacher, but you're in a very unique position of being a writer yourself. So do you feel an intense sort of weight of people in your room who might one day go on and publish their own books, like that sort of thing of you're their inspiration? Because I wouldn't have gone on to do writing had it not been for my junior and Leaving Cert English teachers. Thank you.
No. I don't think there's none of the kids in my room look at me as an inspiration. I'm just a pain in the arse, really. I'm quite strict because I think in my school you need to get the kids through what they need to do for what's best for them. You know, I think they appreciate me for that, but like, yeah, I encourage them to write a course. But in saying that, like a lot of the kids that I've taught have, yeah, they've gone on and they've done creative things, but it's not writing. I can think of a few in particular who they started up the Points of Malt podcast, and now they're in the Black and Irish podcast. They'd be students of mine. A lot of them have become rappers, drill rappers, and rappers who've 10 million views. They get 300,000 listens on Spotify monthly, which is insane. Like kids like that, I would have seen them from the age of 12, 13 in my room, and they would have, like one in particular would have had like a poetry copy, and he'd be getting slagged. And now he's getting 300,000 listens a month on Spotify with his drill rap. But I'd be telling him keep it up, and I'd be looking at his YouTube clips and the rest. So in that sense, I wouldn't be an inspiration, but I'd be an encouragement. But I think just a lot of kids nowadays, I think writing isn't their first outlet for creativity. It's things like podcasts, which I'm proud to see the lads doing brilliantly at, and then and music.
Hi, thanks, Kevin. So I just have a question just based on what you just said there about, young students and that idea that writing is embarrassing or whatever. Like when I met Sophie, one thing we said is like, you want to be able to support the League of Ireland and love poetry at the same time. That was our goal, you know. So just about yourself, you know, when you were growing up, did you experience something similar? Like, did you tell your mates you were writing from a young age?
No.
Did you have, do you know, because like one of the things that Sophie also speaks about with the archive is that like knowing that, you know, Paddy down the road is writing a few poems.
Yeah.
He mightn't be telling you, but he is doing it. So like, how was that experience for you now that you're seeing it in your students? How was it for you growing up?
Yeah, it's blown my mind now. As a youngster, like none of my mates knew I was writing a book until Beatsploitation was being published. What do you do? Like, wouldn't have happened. But the fact now that, and I was embarrassed by that even right with Beatsploitation, I didn't bring it into this school. I didn't like it. Like there was a lot of national attention on Beatsploitation, and it was great and all, but like I was embarrassed about it in the pub with my dad's friends, and in school I wouldn't have talked about it. Whereas now you can't get away from youth. It's everywhere, especially in Balbriggan, and I've kind of enjoyed it a lot more and owned it a lot more and used it a lot more with the kids. I didn't bring in Beatsploitation into school. to show kids that they had a writer for a teacher, or citizens, or short stories, something like that, you know. But for this, we did an event. I was telling Sean, we did an event. We did a launch in we did a Balbriggan launch, which was in a warehouse in Balbriggan, and I specifically asked the publisher, could we do a Balbriggan launch? Like, that was my idea, and it was rammed. It was rammed, and a lot of kids came to the Balbriggan launch, which blew my mind. I did an event last week or 2 weeks ago with there's a new book out called Black and Irish. It's a Black and Irish podcast, but it's a kind of kids book. I did an event with them in Balbriggan, and I told the kids in school, I said, come along, you don't want to hear me talk, you hear me talk every day, but come along, listen to the others. And they came. They walked through the door to, at 1 o'clock on a Saturday, talk about culture and literature. And about 15 boys and girls, Irish, African Irish, Polish, came to listen to us talk for an hour and sat there and listened, and I brought them up afterwards and got pictures with the guys, you know. But I would not have done that at the age of 16, and just to see them do it, it blows my mind. But also what does blow my mind is kids have brought, like, this has blown my mind, is in September and October still, I've parents coming up, sending their kids in to get this book signed in the school, but also kids coming up to me and being proud of it, kind of, and that's blown my mind, school. Yeah.
Thank you both. That was fascinating. Editing is clearly a very complex process, from reading the first 30 pages to, I guess, being here tonight discussing the process. And like, the questions for both of you, what's the best and the worst parts of that editing process? What's difficult and what's easy to do?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. It's always very easy to criticize. That's not a problem. I think it can be. It really depends on the personal relationship. Ultimately, whether you click on. Sometimes you think you have a very good idea, and if the writer rejects it, and you know it's what's needed, it can be very difficult. And I'm sure vice versa. It's a kind of. So I think it does. The more editing I do, the more I realise that it's actually about how you get on with the writer and how you share a vision of what's good. And if that doesn't click, then it can be very difficult.
I could talk for an hour on editing. I love it. I love the process. I love it so much. But like, there's three things within the first 30 pages. I could see where he wanted to bring this, was going to elevate it. The second thing was ego comes into it. I had no ego in this because I think a lot of people are very close to their books, or they write very close. And I found this, especially for Beatsploitation and Citizens, that the characters, obviously they weren't me, but you're pulling from a well that is, like in Beatsploitation, it was a teacher in his late 20s. So it's not me, because the teacher's a murderer in the book. You know, not a murderer, but he allows things happen. But it's still you're still pulling from that kind of place. And then Citizens was the same. Whereas in this, and I found that I'm a better writer when I write about people who are nowhere near me. Obviously, your ego then is less. So if Sean or the editor is saying something about a character or a character's motivations, you're not invested in it as much. So it's easier to process and say, okay, what's best for the story? And then a really simple thing was, like, in this book, the character of Tanya, I had written, I'd always wanted her to be a modern type of page. I wanted to think about how the page looked and how the page was. So I had Tanya written as a screenplay. Not a screenplay. It was in the screenplay format, but she was also in, like, Keeping Up with the Kardashians. She's at the opening of each scene, she'd be sitting in front of a background, and she'd talk, and then she'd be in a screenplay. And then the editor, Sean, straight away said, as soon as he said this word, I knew it was wrong. It's gimmicky. And you have to trust him then. And he suggested, and he said, why don't you do something along the lines of social media? And then it's having in confidence and believing in what he says. Because his line was, yours was, he said something like social media. Within 2 days, I had the structure done. And the structure to me now is, I'm so happy I did it, because it's a new way of learning about the character through. It's literally the post that she gives, the music that's provided, and then how many views she has got. And then we get her. But that was his suggestion. He said, so he pushed me in a direction that I wasn't going to go, which was amazing. But and then just small things, an editor, just suggestions. Why are they 2 scenes when they can be 1? It's so simple, but you need someone to see these things. I also had written at the middle of the book, I had written the end at the middle to create tension. And it was, Sean was like, why is that there? And I was like, oh, I'm trying to create tension towards the end. He's like, yeah, but you're just confusing the reader. So it's simple things. And I do think it's a lot to do with ego. Taking yourself out of the equation, saying what's best for the book within reason, because I've heard stories of people making changes to books that just destroys the book. To me, if it serves the artistic intent of what you're trying to do, and the editor is aware of that, and it's not market forces, then that's a good way to go. Whereas if you're thinking editorially because of the market, that to me wouldn't wash. I'm able to say that because I'm a teacher and I'm not relying on sales. But, do you understand? Yeah.
I'm wondering, I hope this is a question, right? Because it'll start as a comment, then I'll turn it into a question. What I loved and what surprised me in the book was how well you took the characters on their own terms. So Tanya, for example, I'm wondering, as an adult, what I was expecting when I understood the premise was there's going to be some moralizing here, like she shouldn't have made the videos, she shouldn't be going, like that there'd be kind of that tone to it. And I wonder if that was something that happened automatically when you went into these characters. Were you automatically taking them on their own terms? Or was there ever like the teacher daddy voice kind of going, maybe we should steer them into like safer ground? Or is that a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there was never any moralising. It was just to have you spend so long with the characters, like 6 years, and you take them on their own terms, and especially for a character like Tanya, I never wanted her to feel shame or to be someone that felt shame or this is what you don't do with social media. It's just, I'm surprised. I don't know where it came from, but a lot of people are saying that the teenagers sound really like teenagers. Maybe that's just the way I write, I can't pitch it any higher, but no, I meet them on their own terms, but I meet people like Tanya, every day, and I see them on their own terms, and there's no point in moralising. It is what they are. The life they're living is different to the life I'm living, especially when it comes to social media and phones. The line I use is, and we can't understand it, I can, because I'm starting to get addicted to my phone, like they see their phone as a pillow, but it's smothering them, or they see their phone as like a life ring, but it's literally not bringing them any closer to the shore. If anything, it's bringing them deeper. I see people like Tanya, kids like Tanya, like their phone is their outlet, it's their way out of the world that they're in. So you can't moralise about that if you don't understand it, and you try and meet it on their level and write about it from where they see it. But I also think shame changes, and the idea of shame changes. The character of Tanya came out of events a few years ago that you hear about and you realise, but then you realise people moralising and saying this is wrong, don't understand the circumstances or where people are living and where teenagers are coming from. So no, their own terms. The character of Tanya in the book is she's 15, she's the youngest in the book, and she's just addicted to her phone. And before the book starts, she's gone viral for all the wrong reasons. I gave it to a few readers. I'm sorry to go on about it, but I gave Tanya to a few readers early doors, and a few people threw her back at me and said there's no way she would live the way she lives after that event happens. So in the event, it's a viral, sex act. But I've done the story Saving Tanya with my TY class. It's my short story that I wrote in 2015. I do it every year for the past 8 years with my TY class, and every year we've done it. I asked them the same question: do you know Tanya? And every year since 2015, they've got more and more vocal of, we know Tanya, and we know people like Tanya who do the sex act on purpose to get viral and to get more known. And whereas 8 years ago, I had a reader say, this is nonsense, no girl would behave like that. So it's kind of owning what they're doing and living in a time that's alien to me, but is out there, yeah. Okay.
Anyone else? Just the last one.
Brief,
sorry.
I know you're short on time. You were talking about the character of Dean and how you felt you hadn't invested in him enough. And so you went, can you talk a little bit more maybe about how you did bring him out then and what that process was?
Yeah. His life. He was a cipher because there was 4 characters in the book. Dean to me was the way in which I could kind of navigate through the other 3, and he could be the glue that held it together. So he wasn't a real person in the book. And the editor noted that and said, let's get rid of him. I think it's George Saunders says, I read it somewhere, like if there's a potted plant, if there's a lady in a story in a room and you can remove the lady and put in a potted plant, why isn't the potted plant there to start with? And he was right about Dean. I was using him as a character in a book to bring the other 3 together. So I hadn't invested in him as a person in his own right, and the details, like I got down to details with him, little things like, things in his life that made him a person. I know boxing gloves that wasn't in it until the last 3 months. His dad's medal, there's just things in his life that made him come alive, but I hadn't thought of enough, and I hadn't thought of him as a character, like a real character. How does he get on here? How does he get on with his dad? What's he thinking about in certain situations? I was using him to get around the book, and then I got rid of that and used him as a person, like as a character, and made him real, and then we saw what happened from there on in, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Well done. No, I think that's
us.
We're all finished.
Thanks so much, guys.
So we're just going to have Ruth perform her second song, and after that, Shay will be taking over the open mic. Okay, thanks.
So I'm gonna sing a song now, which I think carries on from what you were saying about language in the book. This is a song that was written in Dublin in the 1780s, and it's written in Newgate cant, which was a prison slang from the 1700s. So like that, it's a kind of a snapshot of Dublin at a very particular time. And I learned it from, first heard it from a great film that the Dubliners made in the 60s called O'Donoghue's Opera, if anyone has seen that, which is also an amazing snapshot of Dublin in a particular time. So I think some ties there. So it's called The Night Before Larry Was Stretched. And in case it is just totally incomprehensible, it's about he's going to be executed. So. The night before Larry was stretched, the boys, they all paid him a visit. A bit from their sacks too they fetched. They sweated their duds till they risit. For Larry was ever the lad, when a boy was condemned to a squeezer, would fence every dud that he had, for to help his poor friend to a sneezer, and moisten his gob before he died. The boys, they came crowding in fast, and they pulled all their stools round about him. 6 glims round his trap case was placed, for he couldn't be well waked without them. When one of us asked, could he die without having truly repented? Says Larry, that's all in me eye, and first by the clergy invented, for to get a fat bit for themselves. I'm sorry, dear Larry, says I, to see you in this situation, and blister my limbs if I lie. I'd as lief it'd be me own station. Och, own it's all over, says he, the neckcloth I'm forced to put on, and by this time tomorrow you'll see your poor Larry as dead as a mutton, because why his courage was good. And I'll be chopped up like a pie, and my nod from my body be parted. Oh, you're in the wrong box then, says I, for blast me if they're so hard-hearted. A cheok on the back of the neck is all that Jack Ketch dares to give you, and mind not such trifles affect, nor let not the likes of them grieve you. And now, boys, come tip us the deck. The cards being called for, they played till Larry found one of them cheated. Quick he made a hard rap at his head, for the boy being easily heated. So you cheat me because I'm in grief, if that be the hokier reason. I'll have you to know, you damn thief, that you're cracking your jokes at a season, and I'll leave you your claret to drink. Then in came the clergy with book, and he spoke him so smooth and so civil. Larry tipped him a kill, made him look, and he pitched his big wig to the devil. Then sighing he threw back his head, for to get a sweet drop of the bottle, and pitiful sighing he said, oh, the hemp will be soon round my throttle, and crush my poor windpipe to death. Oh, this is why I have the words. Though sure 'tis the best way to die, though the devil a better I'll live in, and when the damn gallows is high, well, your journey is shorter to heaven. What harasses poor Larry the most, and makes his poor soul melancholy, are the times when he thinks of his ghost that'll come in a sheet of sweet Molly. Ah, sure 'twill kill her alive. So, moving these last words he spoke, we all vented our tears in a shower. My own heart, I thought me heart broke to see him cut down like a flower. On his travels we watched him next day, the trottler I thought I could kill him, but Larry not one word did say, nor change till he came to King William. Then musha his colour turned white. As he came to the old numbing chit, he was tucked up so neat and so pretty. The rumbler jogged under his feet, and he died with his face to the city. He kicked too, but that was all pride, for soon you could see 'twas all over, and soon after the noose was untied, and at darky we waked him in clover, and sent him to take his ground sweat.
Hello all, I'm Shay. I'm here on behalf of the Writing and Literature Programme at ATU Sligo, and I'm going to be taking you through our beloved open mic, a good opportunity for people to share their writing. And our first reader of the evening is one Mr. Liam Colson.
Marbles. To lose one's marbles is an idiom used to describe someone who has lost control of their mental faculties. Often this term is attributed to those who behave in an irrational way. They might talk to themselves. Occasionally paranoia is present, or even more alarming signs of mental illness. We have all said it in a throwaway manner, light-heartedly describing our friends as having lost their marbles, when their behaviour becomes silly or eccentric. Other places in the world consider a loss of marbles as losing courage or the control of self. The term is thought to have originated in America sometime in the 1800s, when marbles were a popular toy, symbolising value and worth. Many were made from precious stones too numerous to list, but one of the most valuable types of marble was agate, ground and dyed with various minerals, comprising of green, blue, yellow and grey. The Lutz marble, created by Nicholas Lutz in 1800 in Massachusetts, became the most sought after and most valuable of all marbles, gold-coloured crystals alternating through brightly coloured bands. One similar opaque Lutz marble sold for $25,000 in 2018. In my inner city playground of the 1980s, marbles also functioned as currency. No marble reached the worth of the Lutz marble, but they told everyone your worth just the same. They were hard to come by, especially if your parents didn't have money. Jeff's Toys had the largest selection, sweetie jars brimming with glass of every colour. I only seen them once, when a neighbour minded me for the day, apologising profusely for dragging me around the town. Lunch at the Gotham Calf, bright lights and decadence. I never told her I didn't mind, that she made me feel posh and wanted. My reward for such a terrible imposition, a trip to Jeff's Toys, marvelling amongst the many colours and shapes, perfectly merging into beautiful, balanced symphony. Would you like to choose 5 special marbles? She asked me from behind. I didn't answer, even though she couldn't see my face, too scared it might not be true. 1 for every year you've been on the planet, she said, and I knew then she meant it. I had seen a very special marble. It lived in my dreams ever since. It was called End of Day, and here it was, made from leftover pieces of glass, gathered and heated to give colour, then rolled and rolled again over more crushed glass, creating a one-off design with no two ever being the same. My second choice was mica, which found itself suspended in clear and coloured glass spheres of blue, amber and green. They even had the rare red glass, but only rich kids owned those. I took 1 in every colour, hesitating at the red jar. I thought it rude and beyond me to expect so much more than a dream come true. I stuck my hand into the cat's eye jar instead, fishing out whatever one my hand happened upon. I thought it seemed more grateful. They were the lowest form of currency, mere coppers in the playground. It was all my measly collection at home comprised of. 3 lousy cat's eyes. 1 I had found in a drain. The second was chipped and discovered in the gutter. The third and nicest I'd found in the urinal in the boys' toilet during an excursion from maths. I washed it well with soap. Wouldn't you like a red one? She asked. I felt silly, like I wanted to cry, but I didn't want to cry. Crying was for babies. Can I asked. Of course, she said. I spent time gently replacing the cat's eye into the jar, even more time analysing the red mica marbles till my tears retreated. My face didn't feel so hot. Mr. Jeff packed my marbles into a little box you'd expect to hold a bracelet, ensconced in ivory tissue, so I wouldn't lose my marbles. Unbeknown to him, I had already lost so much by then, but it would be worse still to lose one's marbles, for this was to lose something of great importance, and what could be more important than one's own mind, his sense of self. Many years later, I happened upon a little box in some forgotten drawer in the Davenport. I didn't know what lay inside, but just as I lifted the lid, I remembered, recalled how priceless they once were, forgotten for years within a forgotten drawer. I had lost my marbles, navigating this world without them for at least 34 years. Right then, I thought about the average lifespan of a person. I researched the Oracle and it stated around 75 years. So then I multiplied 75 times the 52 weeks in a year and came up with 3,900, the number of weeks the average person has to live. I then recalculated, removing my 44 years already spent on this earth from the average lifespan of 75. I had 31 years left, which I then multiplied by 52, only to discover I had 1,612 weeks remaining. If we say then that a single marble symbolises 1 week, then I had already lost 2,288 marbles. We're losing our marbles all the time. No one seems exempt. It's just that no one really talks about it. But maybe they should think about it. In the world of marbles, IMI stands for imitation. Distinguished players are not fooled. They are not taken in by the look-alike characteristics of agate. In real life, Aggies, despite being imposters, still have their decency and their worth. Thank you.
Very nice. You should really think about reading audio or doing audiobooks, Liam. I think you have the voice for it. Our next reader is Marion Neary.
Hello, I'm in my final year of the Writing and Literature programme, and I seem to particularly like writing poetry. I think that poetry is going to become even more important with the onslaught of AI, emotion being the only thing that separates us from AI, and poetry perhaps the purest, most heartfelt human expression of emotion. But then what is poetry? I don't know, Kevin, I thought the 3 pages you read out tonight sounded a lot like poetry. I'm going to read you 2 of my poems. Both feature birds. The first is a short, simple little poem called Bird Bath. I love the way blackbird plumps up to twice its size, its feathers all askew as it revels in the round, then fat and content in a long soak, king of all its surveys from the throne of a bird bath. I only had a bird bath today, you used to say, when it got to the stage that all you could manage was top and tail. And then the second poem is called Chasing the Crows. Ah, you'll be chasing the crows yet, mother was wont to exclaim, fearful reproach of her daughter's wanton spending, and a knowing of the famine that can follow abundance. The long shadow cast from such a hunger as to go scavenging morsels from mean beaks, raucous beating of black wings, blotting out the sky and beating down to the ground, talons tearing at the innocent eyes, gaily blind in the times of full and plenty. But mother, it wasn't the purchase of accoutrements nor frippery wares, but the cost of love to a wastrel heart, flahulach spendthrift spending, unsuspecting of a dream so adorned, ephemeral raiment gone tattered and torn. And now, in the moving black shadows of my mind, I chase the crows for morsels of those good times, that I not be starved of their memory. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marion. I think as writers, there's something endlessly fascinating about birds, isn't there? It's just there's a symbol for everyone. Now, our next reader is an Emil Osinski.
So I'm gonna be reading a poem that is still like in the works, and I'll be working on it for as long as time allows, basically, because there are things that I'll be adding to it. But it's called Our Moments, Fondest Memories. Jesus Christ, I'm shaking so much. Sorry. October 2022. You laid your head on my shoulder as we stood on the bridge during our first date. I can still see your face hidden in the darkness and the river that flowed beneath our feet. November 2022. And I remember standing there under the roof of the ATU Block D, the rain glistening in the streets, and you were talking about the summer camp you facilitated. It was the first time I held your hand. Then when you walked me home, I don't know what came over me, but I kissed you right before I went in. Sometimes I still regret not letting you take that picture of me on the beach in Banduran. I just panicked when you asked. January 2023. We were on the way back to the hostel after seeing a play in London, and we chose to walk through the park. We laid down on the hammock and watched the stars. Cold was biting at our hands and faces, and I can't remember what we were talking about, but we were laughing, genuinely happy. June 2023. I felt your love for me in the way you looked at me when we stood at the beach in Galway. The way you came up and embraced me. You were going back to Canada for the summer the next day, and I wanted to tell you I loved you right there and then, but I was too scared. July 2023. The morning in Windsor, in a cafe near Alex's place. I still couldn't believe we were seeing each other again, but your smile was real, and you were real, and we got smoothies, and you asked me to take a picture, and this time I let you. And then we were sitting on the chairs on the 36th floor of your friend's apartment in Toronto. The lights of the buildings were twinkling all around us, and we were getting drunk on cheap wine from the store down the street. And I felt like there was no place else I wanted to be but here with you. September 2023. Your warm hand in mine, the cold ice cream against my tongue, seagulls and pigeons overhead, and our laugh ringing in my ears. We're docking, because it's never good to have a bird fly over your head. And you kissed my head, and I hugged into you. Then I told you I loved you, in your room in Cartron Bay, while hugging you and crying. And you cried and said you loved me too, really fucking much.
Very nice to me, Alyssa. As a Galway man myself, I can attest that it's the most romantic of all cities, really. So our second last reader is Aoife Hardington.
I wrote this short poem this week after reading an article detailing the sad loss of youth in the conflict in Gaza. Children's bodies are forced open before their mouths are to be fed, and rockets fall like their tears, both so heavy, both misread. The world waits, and so do they. Both search for cover, both misled, and we'll find it in ignorance, while they sift through rubble for rest. And they can't swallow the last death before another is dead. So a young girl's head is wrapped before she can wrap her head around death. What is death?
Thank you, Aoife. Horrifically dark, but damn was it well written. And our final reader of the evening is Brian Saxton.
It's a bit of Irish science fiction, but don't worry, it'll be over in 2 minutes. So the story's called Octopants Always Play the Long Game. So hey and Daughtry, away we go. I see you. Rose had been late. The station was closing when her train pulled in. Shadows were drawing across the mall, so Rose took the main road home instead. The route brought her over the river to see 8 purple-thorned tombernuckles trickling their way out from underneath the bridge. The tombernuckles shook with nervous excitement as she approached. I see you, she said. Now, it had been 2 decades since Rose last saw the Octopant. Herself and the Octopant used to be friends. They'd always played together. The Octopant slumbered its wobbly interior out from under the bridge and slonked next to Rose. How did you find me? I saw your tombernuckles. Some things never change. Hide and seek had been their favourite game. They played for hours. The Octopant would never get bored. You were ages. I was beginning to think you had forgotten about me. I had, admitted Rose, and she had. There had been no time left for games after her mother's death. The Octopant was left to hide alone and play the long game. Your mother misses you. I know. Rose stared at the Octopant. Night had fallen, and the streetlights threw a misty glow across its hedular plumage. Tell her I miss her too, that I'm doing well. I've met someone. He's kind. I will. The Octopant grinned. 6 loam stones distended from its frontalar gromp. Tell Dad I miss him. I will. Want to play another game? Rose nodded. Yes, but this time I'll hide. The Octopant gathered its eyes and secreted them behind the loam stones. 1, it began. Rose jogged to the council car park. She picked a hiding spot. It wasn't a good one. Rose smiled as she stepped under some branches, her shape only partly hidden from the bright street light. The occupant had ever begun at hide and seek. Sinead, go back.
Right, that's it. That's the end of that. Thanks a million to all the open mics. That was a really eclectic mix of writing and reading there. So thank you very much for doing that, for reading for us. I just want to say a massive thank you to Kevin and Sean for this wonderful conversation this evening. I think we learned an awful lot from Kevin. A real insight into your writing, and I'm looking forward to reading your first novel. It sounds brilliant, so I'm going to have a go at that one next. I would like to thank the audience for taking part in the audience Q&A, and as I said, the open mic guests. The music has been outstanding this evening, and it's just amazing how you can connect generations across hundreds of years, and the themes are still very much relevant. Before I hand you back to Ruth for the final song, I just want to say, thank you to the BA in the ATU BA in Creative Writing and Literature for always helping us out with the word each month, and for helping out with the open mic, and for Shay for facilitating the open mic. Our next edition of The Word will be taking place on Wednesday, the 29th of November. It'll be the official launch of A Door Opening, a Sligo and the Legacies of Partition book, edited by Susan McKay and Keith Hopper. And this is a Decade of Centenaries project, so it's taking place on Wednesday the 29th at 6:30 p.m. And just to let you know other events that are happening, we have our Halloween children's events are happening next week, so you can contact or check our social media and our website for that. And the Europe Direct Soapbox will be taking place in the Riverside Hotel on the 10th of November from 10 a.m. There's a regional prize of a Samsung tablet and a national prize of €1,000. So if you'd like to be involved in that, you can contact bcawley@sligococo.ie. And I think that's everything. So thank you all for joining us this evening, and we hope you have a lovely autumn evening now when we finish this, and we look forward to seeing you in November. So Slán agus Garamagat, and I'll just hand you over to Ruth.
So I'll just finish up with a song that, again, I guess in light of the ongoing, tragic and horrific genocide of the people of Palestine, I just wanted to throw this one in. It's an anti-war song written by Sean Moan, who's a singer from Armagh, and it was written in the context of the Troubles, and I suppose it's about how young people can sometimes end up being collateral in power struggles.
Now the